Okay.
Okay, I'm writing down everybody's names here. I'm trying to be good. Okay, so in case no one knows, I am Teresa, the facilitator, and I'm glad I have a very supportive cast of people here today for my debut as facilitator. So, Eracism is the slogan of the group Erace, which was formed in New Orleans in the summer of 1993. We seek ways through person to person communication to show that we are committed to treating all human beings with love, respect, empathy, compassion, and humility. Join us. Erace is an organization that does not espouse any political party, and we have no religious affiliation. We believe in acceptance of all people, and no personal attacks of any kind will be tolerated. We welcome with the, oh, excuse me, we come with the intention to listen, learn, and to not to argue. We begin today by acknowledging that what we know as the United States is the ancestral and unceded territory of many indigenous peoples, and that there are many more nations and tribes that could be named here. Members of our meeting group today are on the lands of the Chitimacha and Choctaw in New Orleans, the Creeks and Cherokees in Atlanta, the Takawan, Lipan, Apache, and Comanche in Austin, the Lenape and Piscataway in Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, the Wampanoag and Nipmuc peoples of Boston, the Cahuilla and Mojave in Riverside, and the Lumbee in Fayetteville. We thank their ancestors for being stewards of these lands through the generations and through today. We need to protect and honor the history of and people of these places. Despite centuries of colonial theft and violence, we should always remember that we are all still on indigenous land, and it will always be indigenous land. So I'm going to start with I wrote everybody's names down because once a teacher, always a teacher. So I do have my little list here. And let's start with Phyllis.
Morning, I'm Phyllis. I'm in New Orleans and I've been coming to Erace since 2008.
Thank you. Luis.
Hi, I'm Louise. I've been coming for since the 90s, the mid 90s, first in New Orleans and now in Austin.
Nancy.
Yes, I'm Nancy, and I've been coming to Erace since June of 2007.
And last but not least, I want to welcome my friend Leanne. If she can get her phone to work. It looks like you're still muted, Leanne. Okay, so Leanne is in Fayetteville here with me, and I'm very happy that she is joining us today. Hopefully, she'll get, I know you had your screen repaired. Do you have a hands-free unit that you can mute and unmute? Maybe that'll be easier, Leanne. Or maybe you can just say something in the chat whenever you feel like it. If you ever get your phone to unmute, I know that maybe 2 weeks ago she had to get the entire screen fixed. So, so I'm going to just explain the format of the meeting. Everyone, please keep yourselves on mutes unless you're talking. And I am keeping a list, and everyone will be called in the order. You can just put one finger up to be put on the list, and people will speak in order of the list. It's 2 minutes for each turn. Please don't interrupt the speaker, and no side comments to others, no personal attacks or name calling. The point of the discussion is to listen, learn, not to argue. If you want to ask clarifying questions when the speaker is finished, you can raise two fingers and go, let's see, and go out of order to ask a clarifying question, not to give your opinion. An example of a clarifying question is, I didn't understand what you meant by, and can you clarify what you meant by? The questions are not to further the opinions of the asker, and clarifying questions do not require a long monologue. and questions that do not qualify as clarifying questions will not be allowed, and the person can go on the list. Okay, only 2 people are allowed to ask a clarifying question per speaker. So one of the reasons I brought this, I was actually going to do something else for today. And then, as you guys all know, I do watch Bill Maher on Friday nights. And this particular Friday, 2 weeks ago, Bill Maher had Donna Brazil as one of his guests. And again, I still watch Bill Maher because I do appreciate the guests that he brings on. And when she said, "We got white smoke and a black pope," I was just intrigued. I texted that to like 20 different people because I just thought white smoke and a black pope. I had heard that the pope was American, but that was the first place that I had heard that they even thought of him as African American. And the very first article that popped up when I saw that was the article I shared with you guys today. So I find it intriguing. And the first article that popped up, I was like, this would make a great Erace article. It's short, sweet, brings out a lot of topics and opinions. And so the list is open for anybody who wants to go. Okay, Louise, I see your name. I mean, sorry, I see your finger. Anyone else while we're here? Okay, Nancy. We almost don't have to have a list, but I would like to practice, so I appreciate you guys humoring me. Oh, and Louise, you are starting the timer, right? So,
Yeah.
okay. I'm going to trust you to time yourself correctly since
Oh, I always do.
one day I'm gonna figure it out, but that day is not today. So go ahead.
Well, that was the first I heard as well about the Pope having any black blood in him. So, yeah, that was a very interesting article for me. And the most interesting part of it was what makes you, black, and or from any culture. Basically, it's how you're raised, you know. And I thought that part of it was a very interesting part because, yeah, well, not obviously because I don't know much about him, but I don't think he was raised with any black culture as a young boy. I'm sure he wasn't given the talk, or given anything that a young African American would get. So therefore, you know, how black is he, and does that count? And so, yeah, it just posed a lot of questions and interesting thoughts about that. For me, it would be great if he embraces it. I don't know. I can't remember if you said that, or in the article it said that he did, or anyway, that would be interesting. It's an interesting thing for me. That's it. I'm done. Hello? Uh-oh.
I think
Is
she's
she
frozen.
frozen?
Yeah.
Yes, I think so. Um,
Teresa, if you
That's
can hear us, you're
interesting.
frozen.
okay. Well, Nancy, I think you were next on the list, right? I'm going to start timing you. Go
Oh,
ahead.
okay. Um, when they first announced the Pope that night on CBS, I mean WWL, they initially brought out that, he was from the Seventh Ward, that his family came from the Seventh Ward of New Orleans. And the first thing, that what was it? Something made me think. I said, I bet he's black. And I bet his family moved to Chicago and left their black heritage in New Orleans. Now, there is a book called One Drop. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's by Bliss Broyard, whose family, um, her dad is originally from New Orleans, from Treme, St. Anne Street. And when he was an editor at Doubleday book publishing company in New York, and they lived in Connecticut. Anyway, when he died, he told the family, um, I've been keeping a secret from you. I'm actually Black and I'm from New Orleans. Now, I don't know where he told his kids he was from prior to him dying, but anyway, they were like, what? Because they grew up their whole life thinking that they were white. Okay. Um, there's also a book called Our Kind of People, which is about the Black upper class in the United States, which started out as the children between the slave and the master, who were, and particularly in New Orleans. However, in the book, that chapter about New Orleans, I don't think they don't go into depth as much as they should, because the guy who wrote the book was actually from Detroit and doesn't really know a whole lot about. Did it go off? I'll get back on the list because it's far more complex than they presented
Well,
in the book.
Okay, the list is actually open unless someone
Oh, I can
wants.
keep talking.
yeah.
Okay. All right. So Nancy, keep talking
Keep talking.
until someone raises a finger and then we'll let them.
Um, I don't think that he should have consulted with someone from New Orleans to talk about the history of the Creole population in New Orleans, because he made it way too simplistic than what it actually is. But anyway, and in that particular book, there was a whole chapter that was dedicated to how to pass. Okay. Because you leave, you go somewhere where they're kind of not used to seeing people, um, people light enough to pass, because there are things that you can look for that will give it away. Okay. If you know what to look for. Okay. Um, and change your name to something kind of Mediterranean sounding. I know people who change their name to Italian sounding names. Or either Spanish sounding names. So people would kind of, if they kind of questioned that they had their hair or their complexion or whatever, that would kind of be a cover for it, and whatnot. But anyway, but I noticed that on the national news stations that evening, they didn't talk too much about him being from New Orleans. They talked about him being from Chicago, but they didn't talk about him being from New Orleans, and they did not go into his ancestry on national networks. The only place I heard it was on WWL, where they went into his background, and they're actively searching right now for trying to find a local descendant and whatnot. So
You mean other than his brother?
a local descendant, meaning someone in New Orleans who's
Orleans.
related to him. May
Okay.
not know they're related to him, because people, and when they would pass, go to the other side, so to speak,
Mhm.
they usually cut all ties with their family
Right.
from wherever
Right.
they were from.
So Nancy, Phyllis
Okay.
has a clarifying
Clarifying.
question.
So my question is, when you look at the new pope, do you see any of those signs that you're referring to?
No, not you can't. I mean, it's a case by case thing. It's not universal. Okay. I worked with a girl one time who, she didn't say she was white, but she wasn't telling anybody she was Black. Okay. So the people in the office thought she was white. Okay. And I kind of called out, not intentionally. And one of my coworkers who was black said, Nancy, you can't say that. I said, why not? Because she white. And I'm like, she is not white, okay? And she heard me, and her face cracked. You could just see it. I had called her out. You're not, they might think that you're white, but you're not white. Okay, why? Okay, and you got nappy edges around your hair. You got a black butt. Um, there's just things.
Thank you, Nancy. Amal, would
Back
you like to
then.
introduce yourself and possibly get on the list?
Sure, I'm sorry I'm late, but I'm Amal and just thought this was a quite interesting topic considering I'm from New Orleans and yeah, just looking forward to the exchange.
Would you like to get on the list?
Yeah, I'll get on.
All
I'll
right,
get
well,
on.
you're up.
Then let me have it then. Yeah, quite interesting, because when I looked at him, going back to Nancy's point, black people know what to look for and what to identify. So when I looked at him, was I thinking white? Possibly not. Absolutely not, as a matter of fact. But was I absolutely thinking black too? Not really. I knew that he wasn't the traditional the traditional looking white person that that we've historically seen in that position. So when this stuff came up about his family being from New Orleans and one of his, I think it was his maternal grandfather was born in Haiti, and there's a lot of things that came up that started to say, okay, this guy is definitely not white. So what are we looking for here? Are people trying to oust him on purpose? Because some people just rather you not know that about them. And then you have to look at the history of this. When we say passing, we have to look at passing in two contexts. There are people who on purpose pass. And when I say on purpose, they literally won't leave wherever they were from, go somewhere else, and on purpose make you think that they're white. Then there are people who will leave and go somewhere else and they just don't say nothing. And whatever people assume they are, they just let it be. They don't necessarily say they're black, but they don't necessarily try to pass for white either. They just don't say nothing. And when you look at the person, if they're white appearing, then that's just what people assume you are. In New Orleans, we call that passant blanc, meaning French Creole, which means you're passing for white. So I don't necessarily know that that's his situation because he said he didn't identify as black. Now, is that a racial identification or is that a cultural identification? Because being culturally black and being racially black are two different things. And him living in Chicago, I don't necessarily know if he had to culturally, racially identify as black, because we can't tell that by looking at him. Now, does he culturally identify that way? Now, that's another conversation because I never heard him say it either way. I would personally want to ask him that question when he said he doesn't identify as black. Is that a racial identification or cultural?
Okay, thank you, Amal. Nancy, you're up next.
Yeah, that's true. And in this book by Bliss Broyard, the family moved from New Orleans to New York, okay? And in the family, they had all of them were real light skinned, and then they had one sister that probably was like my complexion, okay? And because of that one sister, they could not move into the white neighborhood. That makes sense? Because New York is people don't think the North is segregated, but yes, it is. Okay. And so they lived in, is it Brooklyn? Might have been Brooklyn. I think. I'm not sure, but they lived in New York. But anyway, when he went into the military and he was at the office, the draft office or whatever, he did exactly what Amal just described. When he filled out the form, he left the race part blank. And the woman at the counter filled in W for white. And he just let it go. He didn't say nothing. And after that, he was always white. And so there is an issue sometimes of how does society perceive you, and then what happened?
Nothing.
Is Teresa still there? Because I don't see her on my screen. Anyway.
I'm here.
Oh, you're there? Okay.
Had to get something.
How does society perceive you? What do they perceive you to be? And then actually, who do you perceive yourself to be? How do you feel about yourself? And the reason that I say that is because, I used to bring my grandson with me to Erace when we were having meetings in person, and my grandson is biracial. Okay. Now, to look at him, yes, he looks Black. But well, who do you want to be? Who do you identify with? There is the issue of how people perceive you and how they're going to treat you based on how they perceive you, which is what a race primarily, in my opinion, is about. Perceptions. But how do you feel? You be who you think you are. You have to deal with how people see you, but how do you feel internally who you are?
Okay, so the list is open, but I see Beatrice, who I one day may grow up to be. Would you like to introduce yourself and get on the list?
I will introduce myself. I am in Los Angeles at Loyola Marymount's graduation. I have come inside. It doesn't start till 10, but we came early because it's 1,000 people. Anyway, so I came inside to be with you all. And I'm Beatrice, and I'm usually in East Point. And this topic was so interesting that I said I was going to come inside from the graduation that hasn't started and be with you all. And just glad to see you. Thanks.
Hey, Beatrice, since you're not going to be here for the whole meeting, would you like to make a 2-minute comment?
Oh, yeah, and I probably will. The graduations, let's start with 10 till 10, baby. And it's just about 8 o'clock out, baby. We're sitting out there and hope it don't rain on us, Jesus. But first, just to say that I've read a lot of information, New York Times stuff, and seeing the gravesite of the Martinez, and just that the kinds of what we would consider geological information about the Pope's family. But the truth is always, who do you say you are? And when you look in the mirror and you have made a decision where race is concerned, it's on you. But I think that it would be good if there were recognition that there is some color in the gumbo of his life. I just think it would be a good thing. But more importantly, and just briefly, I do hope as a Roman Catholic that he will follow wonderful Pope Francis. And like they say, Pope Francis changed the lyrics, but not the melody. But it's okay. We'll take it. Just keep moving forward. Okay, thanks for the time. And I'll be here as long as I can.
All right, thank you, Beatrice. The list
You're
is
welcome.
open.
Yeah, I'll go if nobody else is on.
Okay, you're up, Amal.
Yeah, I think when you're looking at it from a perspective of self-identification, how the person perceives themselves, I would never tell nobody that they're not, but they say they are when they look in the mirror racially. I used to argue that point, but at this point in time in life, it's like, all right, man, if you say you're not Black, then I'm fine with that, but I don't like Black when it's convenient for me type of people, and those people exist. And the danger of wanting to identify yourself is that we cannot get away from the fact that we still live in a white supremacist society. And I wouldn't want you to really be black, but you choose to identify as something else, and you in a sundown town, and they don't see you that way. You always have to be conscious of your surroundings and how you will be perceived in a society. In other words, yes, you might have one black parent and one white parent, and you choose to identify as mixed, and that's fine. I have no problems with that. But you live in a white supremacist society, and you will not be socialized as mixed in this society. Unfortunately, I'm not agreeing with that. I'm just trying to. I like to deal with the reality of something versus the fallacy of it. The reality of the matter is, you live in a society where you'll be perceived as black because of what was mentioned in the article. It's something called the one drop rule. Now, whether you agree, you don't have to personally agree with the one drop rule, and I'm fine with that. But we cannot deny that historically, whenever something of color has been found in your ancestry, whether that been African or Native American, that's how people are going to perceive you in a white supremacist society. Whether you think that's fair or not, I'm not debating all that. I'm just talking about the perception and the reality of how you'll be seen versus how you choose to personally identify.
All right, Amal, Louise had a clarifying question.
No, no, it's okay.
Oh, okay. He answered it already?
Yeah, or I kind of answered it myself, to be honest.
Okay, fantastic. Well, the list is open. Anyone would like to get on? It's so hard for me to be the facilitator because I always want to talk. So thank you, Nancy. You're up, Nancy.
What Amal said is exactly right, in the sense of you have to navigate those waters of how people perceive you. Okay, I mean, you have your own identity, but also you have to be aware of how people are going to perceive you. And I think that's one of the things. Okay, when my grandson was coming to a race with me, was he like 6 years old or whatever? I mean, he was, very young, and he's young, and now he's 20, and he realizes that that is how the world perceives him, that, he's black. Okay. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. He's black. Um, I also think too, there's an interesting, I've mentioned this before, a movie called Barry, and it's about President Obama when his time at Columbia University in New York, and him trying to navigate between the white world and the black world. Okay, or black culture, and I think that's when because he grew up in Hawaii, and he had an unusual upbringing and background, not typical of anybody, I would say. But he found that he was more accepted by the black community as opposed to being an oddity and a conversation in the white community. That makes sense. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. Louise?
So coming from a mixed race family myself, my father is Egyptian and my mother is English. I never really, because, and my father is very light skinned Egyptian, and but culturally, this is what I find interesting. Is it culturally or I mean, obviously, if you're visibly darker skinned, then there's no getting away from that. But if you can pass as white, what is your feeling of being? And I actually felt a bit of both because I was raised in London, I was raised in England, but we always had relatives around. The language, there was always Arabic going on, there was praying going on, there was the food, delicious food, and just all the other lovely Egyptian cultural parts of my life. Didn't really think it strange until certain things at school, when you would mention your favorite food, and they'd be like, "Oh, what the hell's that?" Or whatever. That it was obviously they didn't, quite understand where I was coming from, but it didn't really matter. It didn't really, and it hasn't throughout my life really been, you know, uh, a problem in any way, I guess, uh, or a dilemma of any kind. But I do find the cultural. I love how I said it at the beginning. The very first comment I made was, "Yeah, are you culturally or just physically, you know, um, that race?" And I just think that's really interesting. I don't think if you don't have the cultural part, I don't believe it's really 100% your background. I do believe you need that cultural part. Anywho, that's me. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. All right, the list is open. You guys know if you don't talk, I will.
Yeah, I'll go if the body's there.
Okay,
You know,
Amal, go
in
ahead.
in the article, it mentions his brother, it says that his brother says that the family currently doesn't identify as black, and the key word there is currently, because are you saying was there a time when y'all did and that changed? Because currently throws the whole sentence off. When you say we currently don't identify that way, well, how did y'all identify in the past? Did it change, or what's the point of putting currently there? If that's a direct quote from his brother, it's in the article. So this is going to be quite interesting, because I want to know who's going to get the opportunity to interview this guy first. What major journalists from around the world, or in the United States, or wherever the case may be, is going to get an opportunity to interview him first? Because when you say currently, that makes me wonder, was there a time when the family identified as something else other than white? So I want to know what currently means in this particular context. And it talks about his, I think it was his maternal grandparents there, one of which was born in Haiti. I think the idea of where a person was born and what they are sometimes are two different things. I think a lot of people heard Haiti and they automatically thought black people. They were French people in Haiti at this particular time. Haiti was a French colony, but there was a point in time when there were, a large French population. So being born in Haiti doesn't necessarily mean black, but it don't necessarily mean white either. So we have to really be real careful when certain things are thrown out there that we automatically think, oh, he was born here, or he must have been black. No, he could have been French, or a mixture thereof.
Perfect timing.
I know.
Okay, so we have Beatrice, Nancy, and Phyllis. So Beatrice, you're up.
Okay. I think the cultural piece is really, really important, as well as not just how you identify and what part of your heritage you celebrate, but the cultural piece is extremely important. Where did you, now we're talking about the Seventh Ward, we're talking about Martinez. The Martinez family, whether she was part of the Creole part of the family or whatever, very, very, you all probably know, good entrepreneurial people. Had the Martinez nursery where kids would go to school. And when those kids came out of that nursery and went to public school, they were way ahead of everybody else. So that would be something good to grasp for. His mama was the Martinez. And I just think that the whole conversation is exciting. Just the fact that this is being talked about and that people are looking through the records and the marriage license and all this, whatever the brother comes up and says. And I remember exactly what Amal is saying, that the brother said about identification. No, we didn't talk about the black being black. Whatever he ends up saying in the interview, just the conversation is good, and it helps us all to know that we are all a lot of stuff, and we need to not throw anybody by the side of the road and marginalize anybody Because if we scratch deep enough, we all, well, of course, everybody came from the continent of Africa. But I just am excited about the conversation. The article was interesting and enlightening. And it's just kind of fun, really. It's just kind of fun. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Beatrice. Nancy?
Yes. It's another story from my early working years. It was a woman who was about my complexion who used to wear these blonde wigs. Okay. And she identified as being white. And I was like, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen in my life. Right. And she did this, how long I worked there, like 8 years. I don't know, somewhere halfway into this employment period. She changed her racial identity from white to Black or African. I can't remember if it was African American or Black or what the terminology was at the time. So I guess that's to tell a story to address Amal's issue of the brother saying we don't currently identify as African American or Black because this woman changed her race. This was in the, I guess, mid 70s, you know, when it was like, okay, now, okay, it's okay now to be Black. And she changed her identity. And you never know how, you don't know how they were raised. Were they may not even have been aware. You don't know. This may all be news to them. They may have moved and really had no knowledge of where they were from, because if you think about going back to the 50s and the 60s, Black people had a lot of secrets coming up from the South. A lot. There's a lot of stuff they didn't want to talk about. There's a lot of stuff they wanted to forget. And you didn't ask, because that was grown folks' business, and you didn't ask. They didn't tell you, you didn't ask.
Nancy, I had a clarifying question.
Yes.
Are you saying that this woman who appeared to not be white was identifying as white and then again as Black over the
Yeah,
course of the
that's
years
what
that
she
you knew
did.
her?
She was white.
Okay.
She's about my complexion, had a nose this wide, and had this blonde wig on that you could clearly tell it was a very poorly fitting wig at that, and was identifying as white.
And then you said something
Somewhere, I
politically
can't
happened,
remember exactly
and then
what
she,
year it was. Okay, I went to work there in 1973 and I left in I worked there 10 years, 1983. So somewhere in there, she decided that she was going to change her race to Black. And that's what she did.
okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure that I
That's
was
what
taking
you
notes
heard.
and I was like, did I hear
That,
that right?
yes, you
Okay.
did. You heard that right.
All right. Thank you.
You could see her hair, back here
Oh yeah, the
showing from
kitchen.
under, yeah,
Hmm.
showing from underneath that wig, and you're like,
I understand. Thank you. Thank you.
all right.
Phyllis, you're up next, but I was wondering
Older lady. Oh, she was older. Okay, she wasn't like
okay,
my age. She was older, like
older.
close to retirement age, and I guess maybe she got to the point where it doesn't really matter now.
Right.
I don't know.
Thank you. Phyllis, I don't know if you saw my message, but as the host, are you able to unmute Leanne? I know the host, I didn't think about that earlier, but I think the host has more. Well,
Control.
you're
Yes.
muted now too. I see that you're talking, but you're on mute as well.
Sorry, I thought I had unmuted.
Okay.
I can mute people, but
But
I
you can't
cannot
unmute.
unmute. I can ask her to unmute, but it's not going to do any good to ask her if she can't.
Can't do it on her. All right. I was just thinking of another
Sorry, I
option.
didn't see the message.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
Well, I think it's interesting in the article that when they left New Orleans, they lived in Bronzeville in Chicago, which was known as the Harlem of the Midwest, which I've spent some time in and around Chicago, and I never heard of it before. I'm hearing an echo. That's weird. But out of curiosity, I looked up to see if I could find a picture of the Pope's brother, John. Very interesting.
Very telling.
Yep, I would say there's a picture of so this is his brother Louis, and
The other brother will give the family away.
yep, I agree them all, and that's the Pope.
No, the brother before, the one you showed before him, before the other brother, the first picture you showed, he
That's-
gives the family away.
Yeah, that's the guy who says they don't currently identify as black.
Okay.
So I do think it's interesting because a lot of times the secret in the family is kept from future generations who then are told or not told anything about their family's background, and so they grow up not knowing what maybe the family situation was. And I did read an article, as Beatrice was saying, the name Martinez instead of Martinez, like most of us would want to read that. And that's the dad's side of the family, and the mother is Baque. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. So yeah, there's just a lot of complication and in some ways, to me, it's like, who cares? I mean, not who cares if the Pope is black, but just let people be people and don't judge people based on whatever your perception of them is, I guess I would say, because usually that turns out to not work in the favor of people of color. And sorry, I woke up with a headache this morning that's not gone, so I don't know how. I don't even know the word for articulate I'm being. So, but yeah, this is, and I will say, in New Orleans social media, Lord, the people posting like, this is my cousin, the Pope is my cousin. And it was just, and like, they're like, he got at 11 o'clock, he was named as Pope at 11:06. New Orleans genealogist had figured out his background. It was pretty funny. So
And God love him, because I wouldn't have known. And Donna Brazil, I think, is from that area originally, because she kept talking about gumbo. Louise, you're up next.
Just a very quick comment on what Phyllis said. You say, who cares about, about that? But for general Joe Schmo, maybe not, but the bloody Pope, man. I mean, that's huge, right? And that's got to be, something to celebrate. A black Pope. I don't know. I think for your average person, yeah, mixed blood, so what? Not a big deal. But I think the fact that it's the Pope, I think that's a huge deal. And as Beatrice said, it's very exciting. I'm not a Catholic at all in any way, shape, or form, but I do realize and appreciate how powerful, well, in the past, how powerful the Pope has been. Let's hope he can, be a little bit more powerful against some of the injustices in the world, So anyway, yeah, that was just a very quick comment on that.
All right, the list is open again. Nancy and Beatrice.
I don't know. Has anyone seen the movie Conclave?
Mm.
No? I recommend it. I mean, there's a lot of kind of, I won't give the movie away, but there are some parallels in how, and they have to choose a pope because that's what a conclave is. They have to choose a pope. And it's interesting, this movie came out last year, and I don't want to give the ending of the movie away, but it's like something the pope has, the pope that they chose has something. Anyway, you got to watch it. That's all I'm gonna say. I don't want to give it away. All the bickering and the arguing and the secrets and the backstabbing and this and that goes on in choosing this pope. It's interesting. I
Nancy,
would
I
say
was wondering,
give it a
have you
look.
seen the movie Angels and Demons? I think that's that writer also one of those books they had a conclave, and that's how I first learned about it. So I forget the name of the writer, but he was very popular back in the day.
Dan Brown, who did
Yeah.
the Da Vinci Code, same
Da
guy.
Vinci Code.
Was it Da Vinci Code or I see I like Angels and Demons better, but it might have been the Da Vinci Code where they had the description of the conclave. It was one of those books.
There.
Okay, Beatrice, you're up.
Yeah. I agree with Nancy that conclave is something worth seeing, especially the ending. It's just so no one would imagine what would happen. But I also just want to mention the name Prevost. I've known, and maybe you all too, growing up, I've known so many Prevosts. And so the family has some connections with Creoles, with just the names, the family names. And it will just be interesting to see how all of this plays out. And in terms of what the family says, what the brothers say, and I'm with them all. As soon as that first brother came on, I mean, I've been to school with people that look like that brother, and they were sitting at the back of the bus with me. So, so come on, y'all, don't play like this. And this is just a little funny story. A guy that I went to school with, elementary and junior and high school, blue eyes, really very fair, blondish hair. He's a member of my church. His whole family, they were African American people. But baby, Michael Stoss would get on that bus and sit just in front of the screen, and we would walk on the bus and just glance at him. I mean, it just passed for a few minutes, so he'd be right in the front of the bus. But the whole, the fluidity of race, especially in the city of New Orleans, is just so complex and so interesting. I mean, I cannot tell you how many times I, as a brown skin, would go downtown to parties where, I mean, the whole color thing, the colorism in New Orleans is an interesting phenomenon. But I think this particular situation with the background of the Pope has just added a new element, new flavor to the whole thing. I think we'll all be awakened to what it really means to be an American. What does it really mean? Who are we? And why are we sending people away? Why are we welcoming Afrikaners? What are we doing? Who is an American? And what does it mean? I just think it's just going to be interesting to see how all this plays out.
Okay, thank you, Beatrice. Phyllis, you're up next.
Well, yeah, I agree with what Beatrice said about the racial complexity of New Orleans. It's not like anywhere else in the country that I've ever been to, which is, I think it's kind of what adds to the personality and the dynamic atmosphere of the city, that there is so much cultural sort of mixing or celebration. I will say it has irritated me when people in the US are like, oh, it's the first American Pope. I'm like, Francis was from the Americas. So let's say first Pope from the United States. Let's be clear, because we are not the only America. And Francis was also, when I looked at him, I thought of a person of color, and a person who, you know, spent more time, sort of like Pope Leo, spending more time in a country not his own, or and he almost identifies as a Peruvian, I think. From all of his time there, he identifies with the people there, I guess. So that's another complication or wrinkle. So yeah, I think it will be interesting if the family looks more deeply into their background and says some more things about it. Thanks.
Okay. We have the list open.
I'll go if nobody's on.
Okay, Amal.
Yeah, this whole conversation, just goes to show, the fallacy of race and this whole social construct, and how, at the stroke of a pen, a person could completely change, racial identities and things like that. That, like I say, that first picture you showed will give the family away of his brother, because if you look at the brother, that brother is actually darker, and this is based on observation. That brother is actually darker than the first black mayor of New Orleans, Dutch Moria. If you look at if you go look up a picture of Dutch Moria, who when he was at LSU identified as other than black, and he later on became the first black mayor of New Orleans. And that first, like I said, that first picture that was shown of that brother, if he showed up at the family cookout, it'll mess things up big time. Especially if especially if everybody is not identifying as black. It was like, well, who's the black guy that showed up? That's what his brother would. If I saw his brother walking down the street, I was like, who's that? That's a black man. Now, if I saw the Pope, maybe not, but it's like I say, it's that goes to show the complexity of race, because you can come from the same family, same mother, same father, and the complexion of the kids could be everything from Wesley Snipes to Mariah Carey, and everything in between, because that's the complexity of how stupid the concept of race is in this country. PBS did an excellent documentary on this. There was this young lady who grew up in an Italian family, thought she was Italian all her life. And what? Oh, I'm sorry. Was my time up?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. When this young lady was identifying as Italian all her life because her mother never told her otherwise, and to give her an explanation.
Go ahead and finish your thought, Kamal.
Yeah.
To give her an explanation as to why she was darker than the rest of the family, they told her, well, you got a Sicilian grandfather, and he was dark skinned, and that's why your skin is dark. Come to find out, the mother had an affair with a black dude. And the young lady was black, and she found this out in her adult life. Now think about how she has to switch up and start identifying. No, she's been Italian all her life, culturally and racially. And now somebody throw a loop in my adult life and tells me that my father's black, and you see the nuances of that, and how stupid that could, how that could throw a person completely off into society where people try to make you choose.
Right. I see you, Nancy. Amal, Louise had a clarifying question.
Sure.
Oh, yeah. Did you just say that Morial identified as white?
I said he identified as other than black when he was at LSU in the earlier days. This is
He identified as non-black, is what you're saying.
he or maybe he just passed and nobody asked him a question.
Okay,
But
so
he,
he personally
yeah,
didn't say,
yeah,
but
he probably didn't say it himself. No,
oh, okay, all right.
Talking about Dutch Morel, not Mark,
Oh,
his
okay.
dad.
Oh, okay. That was before my time.
Ah,
Only
All
just,
right.
I think. Yeah.
Thank you. Nancy?
Oh, that was the point that I was making when I told you about One Drop Bliss Broyard. She said when her dad told them that he was black, and that meant that now I'm black, okay? She said that messed her up. That just totally discombobulated her whole sense of identity, okay? Because now I am part black, and I have been raised in this lily white community in Connecticut, and now, I don't know who I am. I don't know where I fit in. I don't know where I belong. Um, and she said it took her a minute to adjust to that. And she had to go in search of her background. So she came to New Orleans and she spent 3 years here researching her family's history. And she went all the way back to, and I can't remember all the passed down, but the original ancestors of the family, the male ancestor, as far as she could trace back, came from France and was in the military and decided not to go back to France after the war and stayed here and ended up, I don't know if it was him or a descendant that had a relationship with a formerly enslaved person. And that's how the family began. But I can imagine that would have to be like really mind blowing to go your whole life thinking you're one thing and then to find out, hey, that's not who I am or who
Okay,
I
thank
thought
you,
I
Nancy.
was.
Louise?
Oh, something just jumped into my mind that so what about a white couple that adopt a child from a different race, and raise them in their white culture? I don't know. I haven't got an answer to that. I'm just throwing that in there that, that's got to be a difficult one for both, for the child and for the parents. So I just thought I'd throw that one out there as well. That's it.
Okay, Nancy?
Um, I think that's more commonplace today and not as difficult, but the TV series This Is Us, I think did a very good job in showing what that was like because they did adopt a black child. They were a white family that adopted a black child. And it was very good because the show particularly was just about stuff that happens in life every day, just trying to get through life every day. But by having this black child in the family, it also gave the opportunity to show things like that. What is it like to be a white family that adopts a black child? What is it like being in a transracial adoption, which eventually he had to go to counseling for? Um, and it's just about it's interesting. It's won quite a few awards. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. I really do. No?
I haven't seen it. No.
Oh, you haven't seen it. That's what you're shaking no to. I highly recommend it. I thought it was Phyllis recommended it to me. And yeah, it was really good. I thought it was really good.
All right, the list is open unless you guys want to start the 1 minute wrap up.
Yeah, I'll go if we don't start the wrap up.
Oh, go ahead, Amal. You'll be the
Okay.
last comment.
Yeah. You know, I keep going back to that picture of that brother. You know, it's quite interesting because is when you see, because once again, it goes to show the fallacy of how and of the social construct we call race in this country. But if we were judging who's black and who's not based off of the brown paper bag test, that brother would fail. He's darker than the brown paper bag. The first brother, not the second one in the Pope himself, but that first brother you showed, he would fail. Now, there's another test that is not as widely talked about as the brown paper bag test, and that's the hair comb test, which a lot of people sometimes leave out of the conversation. But there was a hair comb test as well. So when they would take a fine tooth comb and they basically, go through your hair with it, and if it goes through real fine, everything was cool. But if it get caught up in the process, then you wouldn't pass that test, and that would mean that you were too black. Now, look at once again going back to that brother, he would definitely pass the brown paper. I mean, fail rather the brown paper bag test because he's darker than the brown paper bag. Now, the hair comb test it could be debatable, but nevertheless, he would give the family away. That is he too obvious. He too obvious. He is too obvious to me. Some white people might look at him and have another opinion about him. But I would say, and particularly in a city like New Orleans, if I saw him walking up the street, that's a black man. How he choose to personally identify, or how he choose to if he choose just not to talk about it at all, that's on him. But of the black people that I know, when they would look at him, it would be no question.
Thank you, Amal. Now, Phyllis, you're at the top of my. Oh, you guys both want to talk? Okay. So Phyllis and then Nancy. And then we're doing the wrap up. There's only a few.
I'm just going to share another picture of John.
Amal likes those pictures.
Looking a little different. I would say the other picture, he might have been tanned, but also still.
Yeah, that's too obvious. That's too obvious.
Yeah.
Like I say, in New Orleans, we would call him Poisson Blanc. We would just simply say he could pass for white. It doesn't really mean that he is white.
Right.
My father's mother's family looked like him. That's why I say that he in my eyesight he wouldn't be able to get away with it. But there's some people who he might can trick.
Okay. Nancy?
Oh gosh. Oh, I was going to tell you another story about a professor that I had. Now that was here, okay? And he came in and he was very fair complected and he had kind of grayish, bluish looking eyes and whatnot. And he's looking at him like, you know, is he you questioning.
Oh, she froze.
That you could
Throwing
tell.
a gang sign too.
Oh,
Huh?
we got you. We missed a few seconds of your, you know what? You froze doing this.
Yeah, it was a great pose.
I mean, and I was like, oh, I think she froze, but that was a funny pose. So
No, I was telling you a story about a professor that I have. I forget what his name was. That was here when I was going to school, and he came in, and that was he was very light complected, and he had kind of grayish, bluish looking eyes and whatnot. But there was something about his demeanor that kind of had me looking at him like, and you look white, but something about you is not white. I don't know what it is. And then he started talking. And when he started talking, that gave him away. Okay. And that he was, no, you're black. You real light skin. And yeah, you could pass, but you're black. And another thing, like in the book not One Drop, Our Kind of People, where they were kind of giving you the blueprint, like how if you wanted to pass, they were like, don't go to New Orleans and don't go to Charleston, South Carolina. And so they know what, and that's part of it too. You go somewhere where people know what they're looking for and how to
Mm.
the brown the hair and the butt and the fingers. Look at the fingers. That's another one. The hairline, all of that. When they know what to look for, the mannerisms,
All right.
yeah, they can
Thank you,
spot you.
Nancy. We got Beatrice.
Okay, I just want to give
Uh-oh.
I'm fading in and out.
It,
Can't really understand what you're saying, Beatrice.
yep. Mm.
Your internet must be weak.
Yeah, it sounds Beatrice, it's so
outside, so my
unfortunate.
daughter won't think I've got lost. But I appreciate meeting. Can you hear me? Hear me now?
Now
Is
we
it
can,
okay?
yes.
Is it better?
Start over.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Oh, I don't know where I was. Anyway, I just want to say I enjoyed the meeting, the conversation, and being with you
Oh no.
out here in the great California. And also, I wanted to say that when we used to see Pasablon people, we could look in their eyes and they would look at us and they say, okay. But this has been a good conversation. Y'all take care. Love you. Bye bye.
Please don't out them. Bye. Thank you, Beatrice. All right, let's start the 1 minute wrap up. It looks like everybody talked. Phyllis, let's just start with you.
Okay, I'm going to go off topic from the Pope and say several years ago, Nancy wanted to go to Nottoway Plantation. I'm putting this on Nancy that we went.
I was going to say, wait a minute, it's probably a mutual decision here.
Well, you
But I
brought it
thought
up. I
about that
said, okay.
yesterday.
But so as if everybody doesn't know, Nottoway burned down on Thursday to the ground. A total loss. And when we went, one of the things on the tour, which of course they, typical, it's not Whitney, I'll just say that. We were outside and they talked about some storm, and thankfully they said only the slave cabins were damaged.
Mm.
And I thought about that in terms of this fire because as far as I know, it was the main house that burned and not any place with enslaved. So there's definitely also talk about New Orleans social media. Lord help me with some of these white people I know.
Okay.
And to say, also Teresa, excellent job.
Thank you.
You've been doing it forever.
Yeah. Okay. You can be
Teaching
a regular
skills
now.
do transfer. Louise, your 1 minute.
Yeah, so now you have to, as Nancy said, you have to do it more often now. Shoot, I had something to say just as the last thing, but it has gone out of my head. Darn it. Oh well. Thank you.
You're welcome. Nancy?
Oh, excellent topic, timely topic. I think it's really the conclave made an excellent choice. And I'm looking forward to good things, and I hope that this doesn't become too big of an issue for him or for his family, because they're probably the ones that will catch the brunt of it more so than him. Yeah. That's it.
Yes, Louise.
Sorry, I just remembered. So I just looked up his brother John and his MAGA He's a real.
I think
he's not-
Lewis is MAGA.
What?
Lewis is MAGA.
Oh, which one is that? It's not the older one that looks more black?
Not the one
The
that I
middle
showed
one.
first. It's the one I showed second.
Oh, okay. Okay.
John is the.
All right. Sorry.
All right. Amal?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, excellent topic. Absolutely enjoyed the exchange. I'm just looking forward to seeing who's going to interview this guy first and who's going to have enough guts to question him about this ancestry of his and see how he answers those types of questions. It really don't matter to me. I don't care if the dude black or white. You know, it just I'm not gonna hold that for or against the man. You know, hopefully he get in there and want to do a good job at being the Pope, because I think it's like 14 billion people who identify as Catholic in the world. So hopefully he want to do a good job in serving not just those Catholics but all of humanity. So yeah, that's going to be quite interesting to see. But like I said, even though the family don't currently identify as black, as long as that brother's showing up, it's going to be hard not to wonder. It's gonna be hard not to wonder. And that one another thing is Nancy mentioned that book, Our Kind of People. Excellent book. There was there was something in that book called the Blue Bloods. A lot of people don't know what that is. And the Blue Bloods are very light-skinned African Americans who, when you look through their skin, you can see their veins is like has a bluish type look to it. They call them Blue Bloods. And if you can, that was an exclusive group for people who were very light skinned. Like, we don't talk about that history in this country. I mean, in society rather, because we don't want people to know that ugly history about how black people excluded other black people based on skin color. And that book goes into that history. So, good book.
You know, Amal, I've been wanting to do, and the next time I facilitate, I think maybe I will do that. I've been wanting to talk about that for a while.
About the blue bud?
No, just about how we do each other
Oh, okay. Bye,
based
Louise. I'm
based
sorry
on
you're
complexion.
feeling bad. Mm-hmm.
Based on
Well,
complexion.
I
Yeah.
got my notes here. You know, when we're talking about what race is the Pope, and a lot of people, I sent this article out to my friends because I was just like, white smoke, black Pope. I just love that phrase. So I sent the article and that phrase to several friends and relatives. And essentially, my niece was like, well, he's never identified as black, so he's white. And, you know, for her, it was really cut and dry. And I was like, but his grandparents were mulatto on his mother's side. That has nothing to do. And she was like, well, and then we got into a debate about if he's never identified on Teresa, why? And I said, well, you know, what's interesting is whatever's convenient for the dominant narrative, that's what this Pope is. If it's convenient to say and acknowledge that he's white, that's what he is. If it was me, it would be the one drop rule. It wouldn't be what I identified as, it would be how I was viewed, you know. And so, in the one way, he gets that benefit. But what I started to tell my niece, and no one really talked, you know, maybe one of you talked about the Great Migration. I said, this is how Black people pass. They first move away from where everybody knows who they are to a place where they're unknown. They look white, they can act white. I said, to me, he is the passing Pope. I will acknowledge both. He may be culturally white, but that's because his whole family had the benefit of passing to be white. And I said, that is a strategy. So I am going to call him I mean, I'm not Catholic, but I was just like, he's the passing Pope. And it's interesting. Let's see. What somebody made me write this note down or motivated me to write this down when you talk about the geographic hierarchy of racism. I wrote that down. It's just like in the South, they're not racist, they're patriots. In the North, they're not racist because they're not from the South. In Canada, they're not racist because they're not American. In Europe, they're not racist because they're not American. And it was just like you never it's never they are not racist. And I come through that conclusion being a woman of color living in the States and abroad. And it was just like, who everyone seems to frown upon are Southern white Americans. It's just like, but y'all would be real comfortable with one another. The only discomfort would you wouldn't want to be associated to their views, and yet you say it in a different way. That's all that is. Well, we're not racist like those rednecks in the South. Is like, yeah, you're racist like those very elite, educated, whatever in whatever northern New England state. I mean, I've been around racist people of any country, and it's amazing how they think, oh, I'm not that. Like, yeah, you got your own flavor. Another note, when talking about Obama, I was living in Honduras at the time when Obama became president. And a lot of people were saying in Honduras, some of them are technically Americans because they were born in the States. Their mother and this is something that the Orange Menace is trying to do away with. Rich women being able to fly to the States, have their child, and boom, their children have American citizenship and then go back to their home country. So there are a lot of Hondurans, at least when I was teaching at the American school in Honduras, who voted for Obama or who voted for John McCain. They could vote in the election because they were technically American. And they said that Obama won because of his whiteness. And it was really interesting because I would just think growing up, sight unseen, you would never look at Obama and say he's white. I mean, sight unseen.
Absolutely not.
When I moved to Austin and nobody had to check a box or change which box was checked, I just moved from one place in the States to another and was not considered Black. So sometimes you don't have to do anything. You just have to move. And it's how society perceives you is how you are. And I thought, well, obviously I was raised Black, I identify as Black. What are you not picking up on? And only thing I can tell is that I speak English well and I read a lot of books. And so what some people perceive as being Black, it has to be something that's really, really, truly racist, as if Black people can't be educated, speak English, or read books, or be well traveled, or whatever. And that's another thing about this Pope. His accent, my mother didn't think he was American. She thought he was a naturalized American. And I said, Mom, he was born here. Oh, well, his parents must be, foreigners. And I said, Mom, they were born here. I had to let her. I said, when I was living outside the States, my accent changed. Your accent doesn't stay the same. And my sister who lives in Virginia, she says, yeah, when I visit you guys, I know my accent changed. I catch myself saying things that I don't say when I'm in Virginia. So that's kind of fluid. And it was interesting how some Americans were upset that he first spoke in a foreign language rather than English. And it was just like, your whole mindset is very narrow. This man has a very diverse background, even if he does not.
How many languages does he speak, by the way?
At least 3. I know English, Spanish, and Italian. But Latin? Well, Latin's a dead language, so I put an asterisk by that. But yeah.
But for the church, it's
for the Pope, he does speak that, but he speaks several languages. So, I can give him a pass on that. Let's see, what else? Oh, I did already say that his family's race changed during the Great Migration when they went to Chicago. Oh, I was going to point out that some of my students, when I taught in Austin, and I forget what I was doing, but I looked at their demographics and I was surprised that students who were darker than me had the white Hispanic box checked. And I just really, I would have never guessed that you considered yourself white, but okay, there's that. And technically, since I was born in Japan, I've never tried to be part Japanese or citizen or whatever, but I was born on a military base in Japan, which is, it's just like perfect example of just because I was born somewhere doesn't mean I'm of that thing. Nancy, your comment about your your coworker made me think of Rachel Dolezal. I mean, she went back or whatever, but that's what I wrote. I was like, oh, this is kind of a Rachel Dolezal situation. Although I don't think she's ever reclaimed whiteness. I haven't kept up with her, but she identifies as black, whatever. And then it looks like not even finally. Um, Finding out that you're black afterwards. I think what may cause people to have an existential crisis about that is that they've heard all of these white supremacist things about what black people are, and now are they suddenly inferior because they realize that they are black, and they have to wrestle with that, and they have to wrestle with the fact that, oh, I'm colorblind, I never, and then you find out that you're black, and you're just like, oh, I got to reconsider what I originally thought what black was. If I can be this person, and I always thought that I was white, and da, da, da. So I think that's what they're wrestling with. It's not their genetics that's doing it. And lastly, thank you, Amal, for bringing up the fine comb test, because this is something that you want to talk about. My mother is 84, I'm 54, and we have never, like, we could start arguing today about her use of the phrase good hair. I said, you black people. You're being racist against black people when you say good hair. No, I don't. What I mean is, and she will explain it, and I will still say yes, and that's racist. So thank you for bringing that up. That's a traditional, I wouldn't even say heated argument, just a disagreement
Oh, it's
between.
heated. It's heated. It's a very heated
Well,
argument. There's
no,
no.
we don't start shouting and getting all emotional. It's
Yeah,
always
it's a heated argument
polite.
because not enough of us want to admit that there was a time, and let's be honest, when someone would come around who had your hair style or texture, that it would be. I remember older women would ask. There was a time when older women would ask younger women who had dreads or their hair in the natural state, like, "Baby, what's wrong with your hair?"
Oh, that did happen when I was 24 and came back with
Yeah,
dreads.
what's wrong with it? As if it's
Hmm.
criminal or something. You know what I'm saying? It's like, what do you mean?
My
What's wrong?
dreads turned 31 this year, so yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
a very heated argument because how do you then go back and tell a person who's an elder, like you don't see nothing problematic about that question, but they grew up at a time and in an environment when that would have been a legit question to ask. Like, why do you wear your hair like that? Why don't you comb it? Why don't you straighten it? Why don't you? And the list of why don't yous go on and on.
Yes,
And
they
so
do.
it's hard to you don't want to come off disrespectful by confronting the person who's your elder by saying something's wrong with that thinking, but sometimes you have to confront it.
Oh, I
Sometimes
tell her. Anytime it comes up, I tell her.
Oh,
Um,
I went through that with my Angela Davis back in the day.
oh, with your afro?
No, my parents they wasn't having it. My mother was cool with it, but my father he was like, well, you have your thought, I have mine. You know. So,
yeah, it's a hard conversation to have. Like I said, the hair comb test kind of get left out of the equation, but the brown paper bag test is very understood because, like I said, they were and as for the black community as they want to present themselves to be today, Delta, AKAs, you can get into them if they played the brown paper bag test back in the day. And
Mhm.
so I'm sure they wouldn't say that or do that now, but there was a time when they did because these were elite, going back to that book, our kind of people, the Jack and Jills and the Boulets and all of these different exclusive clubs that these very lighter skinned African Americans had. People who look like me, absolutely not.
Well,
Absolutely.
Amal, I've never seen you, but just by that reference, I think you're darker than me.
Yeah,
So,
I'm much darker than the brown paperback.
okay. And my mother is lighter than
Oh, they
me.
also used to tell you make sure you marry somebody with good hair so your children will have
So
good
your
hair.
children will come out, yeah. Yeah. And I've heard darker skinned African American women say, I'm not gonna marry nobody as dark as me because I don't want them children to come out. So, like I said, these are conversations that we'll say these things amongst one another, but when white folks come around, we'll change the conversation.
Yeah.
Because we don't want them to know that we actually think like this. But no, we do this too. That's why I say this.
Ourselves. We do
Yeah,
it
we
to
do this to ourselves. That's why I say this thing, this the social construct of race has these nuances to it and these little complexities to it that are very strategic depending on who you're listening to when they say it, and then it'll come under the banner of, oh, that's just my preference. I don't have nothing against dark skinned people. I like light skin. No, you
Right.
no, let's be honest, because I there was a self-hatred that I had for myself at one point in time. And let's be in the 80s, if you ain't look like the Barge family, you were black and you didn't look like them, you didn't have that DeBarge type look.
And the
You was
hair. Don't forget the
yeah,
hair.
the hair too. I'm talking about the DeBarge look. They had the hair. If you didn't fit that description, oh my God, then no, you was not seen as a similar beauty. I grew up in the
Well,
80s, so I know how that was.
Amal, I don't want to really cut you off, but we're at 11:30.
I'm sorry.
Y'all
Y'all
got
have a
going
good
at
week.
the end. You want to
That's
stop
the
the
way it
recording
is.
and make announcements?